Yes, Jyoti, you can start.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramya.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I am audible to everyone and my slides are visible. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, thank you. So today's topic is thyrotoxicosis. Okay, so let's go by definition. What is thyrotoxicosis and what is hyperthyroidism? Though they sound both, there is certain difference. Please let me come to an important slide. Okay, then I'll go to the next slide. So what is thyrotoxicosis? Thyrotoxicosis is nothing but it is a symptom complex, okay, which is due to increased levels of circulating thyroid hormones producing various clinical and biochemical manifestations. So this is the definition of thyrotoxicosis. Then what is hyperthyroidism? Are both same? No. Actually, it is the overproduction of thyroid hormones by the gland. It means that there is some other source which is secreting thyroxine and causing symptoms and signs producing hyperthyroidism. So hyperthyroidism means it is the gland that is overtly producing hormones and then it is released into the circulation. Whereas thyrotoxicosis, it could be either from the glandular source or from the extraglandular source. What are the extraglandular sources? Okay, let me come to one by one. So it is not from the gland means it could be from the ectopic thyroid tissue. So the thyroid tissue might be present somewhere else. So it can be present anywhere else. But most commonly in clinical scenarios, we'll be seeing struma overi. So it is a type of, which type of dermoid is it? Teratomatous dermoid, where there is predominant gland present in the ovary, and most of the time it will be thyroxine that will be secreted by the struma ovary. Okay, or sometimes a metastatic follicular carcinoma can produce that is thyrotoxicosis signs and symptoms. Sometimes gestational trophoblastic tumors, non-gestational trophoblastic tumors can produce thyrotoxicosis symptoms. Okay, or and one other entity called thyrotoxicosis factitia. So it is by the patient if he or she consumes because of some psychiatric disturbances, psychiatric problems, they might be overtly taking excessive supplements of thyroid hormone that will cause the temporary, a transient thyrotoxic symptoms that is called thyrotoxicosis factitia. Okay. So before knowing this, let us go step by step how thyroid hormone is synthesized so that we know the proper physiology of how to control at what step we have to control these thyrotoxicosis symptoms. As you all know, thyroid gland is the most very important endocrine gland situated in the neck. It has highest concentration of iodine compared to majority of the parts of the body. Thyroid has highest capacity to imbibe, to uptake the iodine from the blood against a 100-fold concentration gradient. So there are so many mechanisms which involve iodine trapping. So the iodide which is ingested by us, so it will be actively trapped by the thyroid hormone. As you all know, there is a follicular epithelium, basement membrane, and the lumen of the follicle will be filled by the colloid material. Okay, so the first iodide has to be trapped inside, and then it has to be it has to be transported across, and then it has to be combined with the thyroglobulin. There should be that iodide should be converted into iodine, and then it has to be pinocytosis. So by cell drinking, it will be further secreted into the lumen of the follicle, and then it has to be actively combined with the tyrosine. So how it forms? So first is iodine pump trap. Okay, so there is iodination and then thyronin. That is, as we all know, there is something called as monoiodothyronin and DIT, diiodothyronin. If MIT and DIT combine, it forms the most active form, that is T3. If two DIT molecules combine, it forms a less active but highly concentrated hormone called as T4, that is tetraiodothyronin. So whenever there is necessity of hormone, the hormone will be released into the circulation. Okay, I'll come one by one in the subsequent steps. Okay, So this is MIT and DIT. Next, they form the T3 and T4. So coming to the thyrotoxicosis. What are the different causes of thyrotoxicosis? One is the most common cause, which constitutes around 60 to 70% of the thyrotoxicosis is Graves' disease. So it is the most common cause of thyrotoxicosis. Or sometimes it is toxic multinodular goiter. So in exams, they will be asking you, why should you operate a multinodular goiter when the patient is not willing? Or if the patient asks, why should you operate? Why should you counsel her for surgery? So it could be a multinodular goiter. It might develop secondary thyrotoxicosis. So in order to avoid that complication and also the follicular carcinoma of thyroid, you have to operate. So it could be either a preventive measure or a therapeutic measure. So toxic multinodular goiter, where certain autonomous nodules, so the nodules, it will lose the effect from the TSH, they become autonomous and start secreting, pouring so much of thyroid hormones into the circulation, causing thyrotoxicosis. Or there could be a single toxic nodule. So it need not be multiple nodules. There could be a single toxic nodule. And so many other causes, like one is called, as I already told you, factitious, because of the extrinsic excessive uptake of the thyroid hormone. So the patient might be, because of the psychiatric problems, most probably psychiatric problems, they might take excessive hormone supplementation, and that will transiently give rise to thyrotoxic picture. And there is something called as Jod-Basedow effect. What is Jod-Basedow effect? So it is iodine-induced thyrotoxicosis. So I can give an example as, see, suddenly the lockdown, so vaccine becomes successful and your colleges reopen and you all go to the college and you start studying excessively. Yes, we are back into the work. So you start studying excessively. So in the same way, an iodine deficient person, when he or she is supplemented with the iodine, that will cause overactivity of the thyroid gland, producing, instead of required amount of thyroid hormone, it will start secreting, whether tomorrow I may eat or not. So in that way, it will start pouring excessive, it starts synthesizing thyroid hormones in excessive amount and throws into the circulation. So this effect is called Jod-Basedow effect or iodine-induced thyrotoxicosis. And there are certain autoimmune diseases which I'll be dealing later. D. Quervain Hashimotoxicosis, as I already told you, Hashimoto's thyroiditis is actually thyroid destruction. But in the initial stages, it gives hyperthyroid picture and later it will go on into permanent hypothyroidism. There is another entity called as neonatal thyroiditis and struma ovary. I already told you, presence of ectopic thyroid tissue, functioning thyroid tissue inside the ovary, and functioning follicular carcinoma or choriocarcinoma. So these are the causes. So it could be from the thyroid. The most common diffuse toxic goiter is this. That means the entire gland is secreting excessive thyroid hormones. That is diffuse. That is Graves. Next is toxic multinodular, toxic single nodule, and these other causes. So am I with you till now? So coming to,
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
okay. So you're with me till now. Okay. So it could be from the thyroid gland or it can be extraglandular source. Okay. But the total symptom complex, whether glandular or extraglandular, it is called thyrotoxicosis. But when it is specifically from the thyroid gland, it is called hyperthyroidism. Please know the difference. Okay. Now coming to the Graves' disease. So it is, as you all know, it is an autoimmune disease with increased circulating specific antibodies. Okay. So what are those? What are the different chemical substances that can cause excessive thyroid production? Okay. One is TSI, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins. So these immunoglobulins, they start stimulating the gland to produce more and more thyroid hormones. And another one is TSAB, LATs. So long acting thyroid stimulators. So what these things will do, they'll keep on stimulating the thyroid gland, each and every cell of the thyroid gland. So there is diffuse production. So there is no question of storage. It is only the production, and immediately the hormones which are produced in the thyroid gland will be immediately passed on into the circulation. So there is literally, there is no colloid material inside the thyroid gland. And as you all know, in highly functioning state, as in pregnancy or lactation, the cuboidal epithelium will become columnar. So even in Graves' disease, the cuboidal epithelium will become columnar, and it almost looks like a dry gland. Dry means there is no active colloidal material. There is no question of storage. It is simply producing and pushing it into the circulation. So what happens actually? So there is diffuse hypertrophy of the gland with less colloid, increased vascularity, definitely, because the production is more, and the tall columnar cells lining the follicle. Whereas, so it is in 60 to 70% of the cases, the most common cause of hyperthyroidism is Graves' disease. Okay, the HLA subtypes. See, these HLA types, you have to get them by heart, because these are the filtering MCQs. So these combinations might be given during your MCQ examination. Okay, HLA B8, DR3, and DQA1. So these are the specific for Graves' disease. Okay, and there are certain other antibodies which resemble TSH. So it is not actual TSH. So in case of hyperthyroidism, the TSH values will decrease in amount because of the negative feedback mechanism. But what happens here? There is another pseudo, that is circulating antibodies which resemble TSH, and these in turn will stimulate the thyroid hormone production. So it is not the original TSH, the antibodies which resemble the TSH. Okay. So TSH receptor antibodies also are pathognomonic of Graves' disease. So what are the chemical substances which are elevated in case of Graves' disease? Are elevated anti-TG thyroglobulin, anti-TPO antibodies. See, anti-thyroid peroxidase antibodies, these are positive both in Graves' disease as well as Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Okay, whereas anti-TPO are more specific for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So 50 to 75% it is specific for Graves' disease, whereas it is almost 80 to 100% specific for Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So there will be elevated anti-TG, anti-TPO in this Graves' disease, and you can even do the HLA typing also, so that you can get certain. So obviously the thyroid hormones, both T3 and T4, will be excessively elevated and TSH will be decreased. Then you can ask me, madam, if TSH is decreased, so it is the antibodies, the pseudo antibodies which resemble TSH, that is stimulating the thyroid. So you all know the clinical features of hyperthyroidism or thyrotoxicosis. The earliest is heat intolerance, excessive sweating, okay, moist palms and soles with excessive sweating. So there is weight loss, there is excessive hunger, okay, nervousness, emotional liability, insomnia, tremors, psychosis. So there is dyspnea, palpitations, congestive cardiac failure, diarrhea. So you can go system wise, okay, each and every system is involved, and there is high BMR, the basal metabolic rate is increased. So the menstrual disorder which is associated with hyperthyroidism is oligomenorrhea followed by amenorrhea. Whereas in hypothyroidism, if you remember, there is initial menorrhagia followed by amenorrhea. So any thyroid disorder will ultimately, at the end of its course, will lead to amenorrhea, whereas oligomenorrhea is seen in thyrotoxicosis. I'm sorry. Whereas menorrhagia is seen in initial stages of hypothyroidism. There will be infertility. There is inability to conceive. But here, the patient will conceive, but there will be repeated miscarriages. So that is the difference between thyrotoxicosis and hypothyroidism. Okay. So this is the classic sign. Okay. I'll come to eye signs one by one. So what are the signs? The patient will be restless. There are warm and moist skin, tremors, the static tremors, and all the changes of hyperdynamic circulation will be there. So the rate will be increased, the volume will be increased. So there is bounding pulse and all the eye signs. Okay. It depends on the stage and chronicity of the Graves' disease. The arrhythmias, which are most commonly associated with thyroid disorders, that is thyrotoxicosis, is atrial arrhythmias. And because of the hyperdynamic circulation, there will be systolic murmurs. Okay. The murmurs will be usually systolic in nature. And there is something called as pretibial myxedema. So myxedema means we usually think of hypothyroidism, but this pretibial myxedema, it is because of the excessive deposition of glycosaminoglycans over the dorsal aspect of the leg. So that leads to, that is a misnomer. Actually, it's not actually the myxedema, but it is the skin sign seen in hyperthyroidism. Okay. So I'll be coming to the treatment options. First, you have to control with medical management. So antithyroid drugs have to be started. You have to thoroughly evaluate the patient, whether it is from the thyroid hormone itself or from any other source. You have to do, even proceed with the ultrasound abdomen. You have to go for antibody study and then confirm it to be hyperthyroidism. Then you have to start immediately with the antithyroid drugs. Okay. The most commonly used in India is carbimazole. Okay. We start with 10 to 20 mg BD or TID. It depends on the response of the patient. Usually we give 10 mg TID and the dose has to be increased. Whereas PTU, propyl thiouracil, it is given 100 to 300 mg TID. See, the magic with PTU is it is used in pregnant women, pediatric population, and it inhibits the peripheral conversion of T4 to T3. So the PTU, propyl thiouracil, it is used in pregnancy, in the pediatric population, as well as in the, it also inhibits the peripheral conversion of T4 to T3. So in that way, you can remember propyl thiouracil. But the availability is very, very less. Okay. So most probably we'll be getting this carbimazole in our routine practice. Okay. And also, you should inhibit certain cardiovascular things. Okay. So this propranolol, what is it? Propranolol?
Beta
Okay,
blocker.
a non-selective beta blocker. So what does it do, doctor? Any idea? What does propranolol do?
It decreases the BP, decreases the heart rate, decreases.
So beta blockers immediately they decrease the heart rate. Okay, and also they have an excellent function, that is it also inhibits peripheral conversion of T4 to T3. What is the most active form of thyroid hormone? Is it T3 or T4? Yes, T3. Okay, so we want less amount of T3 in the circulation. It means we have to prevent the conversion of T4 to T3. So that is done by propyl thiouracil as well as propranolol. See how the magic of words is. It is propyl thiouracil, propranolol, peripheral conversion. So you can remember in that way. Okay, L-Dopa. So the most common drug that is used is 20 to 40 mg in divided doses, either in OD or BD doses. Okay. The most dangerous effect of this antithyroid drugs is agranulocytosis. Sometimes these patients will be referred immediately to the surgery department because of the failed medical management is agranulocytosis. So the patient every month or every fortnight, they have to get their total count and differential count, because this agranulocytosis is a dreaded complication. The person will immediately land into sepsis and there are further many complications. So you have to get the total count and differential count every fortnight. Okay. So this is the most common cause where the patient from medicine department, they will be referred to us for immediate surgery. Okay. Where do we come in picture? So in which conditions the surgery is warranted? So there are certain other methods for the management of Graves' disease, which is radioactive iodine ablation. Okay, so we give radioactive substances. So those will go and get concentrated anywhere where the thyroid hormone is getting produced. They selectively destroyed the thyroid tissue. Okay, so these are radioactive substances. These cannot be given to each and every patient. Okay, so when such radioactive iodine is contraindicated, then we can go for surgery. Whenever there is suspicion of cancer, so it could be papillary carcinoma or follicular carcinoma, or whenever you suspect any carcinoma, go for surgery. Don't go for medical management. Medical management is for initial management of the toxic state. You have to definitely, wherever you want the tissue, okay, then you have to go ahead with the surgery. In a younger patient, okay, where there is a lot of life, okay, in such patients, you have to go for surgery only, because that will give long-term and permanent cure for a patient. So there won't be any future remissions and relapses. So it is almost a permanent curative therapy. Whenever there is large goiter, will you sit and wait for your medicines or radioactive substances to act? No. So in such cases, large goiter with pressure effects or without pressure effects, you can go ahead with surgery. Okay. Pregnancy and lactation. So even in pregnancy and lactation where radioactive iodine therapy is contraindicated, you have to go ahead with the surgery. So initially antithyroid drugs followed by surgery. And in thyroid ophthalmopathy with smoking habit. So what happens in thyroid ophthalmopathy is whenever you give radioactive iodine therapy in a smoker with thyrotoxicosis, the thyroid ophthalmopathy, so the exophthalmos will get exaggerated. There will be worsening and even blindness. So in such cases where RAI is contraindicated, so in such individuals, you have to proceed directly with the surgery. And in those who need a rapid control of symptoms, so there is severe toxicosis, the patient might even go for, who is ready to go into congestive cardiac failure. So you cannot sit and wait with the radioactive iodine therapy because it takes almost 3 months to bring it to the euthyroid stage. So in such case, the individual might even die. So in such cases, you should not sit and wait. You can directly go ahead with the surgery. Okay. So please remember these points because MCQs will be asked in future. So we have finished the diffuse pathology. That is, each and every cell in the thyroid has produced excessive thyroxine and it has sent into circulation. But what about this? This is called as toxic nodule, in which one nodule, so it is usually the functioning solitary nodule, it is producing excessive thyroid hormones. Okay. What happens here is this toxic nodule will become dominant. It will suppress the surrounding follicles. So normally they will be working. So once this nodule becomes toxic, it starts suppressing the surrounding, the neighboring thyroid tissue. So only the nodule takes up the radioactive isotope. And there will be hypo uptake by the surrounding tissue, which was normal, which was supposed to be normal. Because of the domination by this toxic nodule, the surrounding thyroid tissue will not take any dye. So this is pathognomonic. So when there is excessive uptake of RAI, what happens? It becomes a hot nodule. Will it become hot nodule or cold nodule? When there is excessive uptake, it becomes hot nodule. When there is normal uptake, what is the nodule? Is it cold or hot or what? There is something. Neither hot nor cold. Anyone? Anyone? Is there anyone messaging? Am I audible? It is called warm nodule. Okay. What happens in toxic nodule? Okay. Here eye signs are usually not seen. Eye signs are very specific for Graves' disease. Whereas in this toxic nodule, they are usually not seen. And there is excessive T3 more than T4 and low TSH. Whereas in Graves' disease, both T3 and T4 are excessively elevated. Okay. On ultrasound, there we see diffuse enlargement, whereas in this, we can see a predominant nodule which is enlarged and more, it is receiving more vascularity. The problem with this is the technetium. See, usually nowadays we are using the technetium 99 scan more often than iodine 123. Okay. When you do technetium 99 scan, there will be no uptake by the surrounding gland. Okay. So only the nodule is taking up the radioactive isotope. Doctors, are you understanding?
Yes, ma'am.
So there is a single toxic nodule secreting excessive hormones and it is suppressing the surrounding thyroid tissue. So only the radioactive substances is taken up only by the toxic nodule. Hence it becomes a hot nodule and the surrounding gland will be, it won't take up any radioactive isotope. Okay. So if you see this picture, the big black dot. So are you seeing any uptake by the surrounding thyroid tissue? Okay. It's not there. So it is only the toxic nodule which has taken up the radioactive isotope. So this is classic solitary hot nodule suggestive of toxic nodular goiter. Okay. What is the treatment? So first is initial control of the hyperthyroidism by the antithyroid drug. And if that is the only toxic nodule, you can go ahead and do the hemithyroidectomy. Okay. Or if it is very small, you can directly go ahead with the radioactive iodine ablation, either to destroy that nodule, or if there is any residual nodule left, you can ablate it with the iodine 131. What happens if you do hemithyroidectomy? Once the toxic nodule goes away, once the dominant nodule is removed, the surrounding thyroid tissue will become normal and they start secreting normal levels of thyroid hormones. You may ask me, Madam, if there is excessive hormone production, what about TSH? See, it will go out of control of TSH, or because the normal thyroid tissue will be usually under the control of TSH. So this is not only suppressing the surrounding tissue, it is also not responding to the TSH. So that is, once the toxic nodule is removed, the rest of the thyroid tissue which is remaining will start secreting normally. Okay, so that is the mechanism in toxic solitary nodule. Coming to the toxic multinodular goiter, which is also called as Plummer's disease. Okay, so it is most important cause of secondary thyrotoxicosis. The most important cause of primary thyrotoxicosis is just now we discussed.
Graves.
Graves disease. Okay. So see, I need to hear some voice, okay, so that I can go ahead. Okay, it is important cause of secondary thyrotoxicosis. So the gland which was sedentary, now it has suddenly picked up and started secreting thyroid hormones on their own without any stimulation from the TSH. Okay, but there the neurological symptoms predominate. Here the cardiac symptoms will predominate, and they are absolutely not TSH dependent. They are not going to listen to the higher authority, that is TSH. So there are multiple nodules. So they have declared their independence, and autonomously each small nodule, multiple nodules have started secreting excessive thyroid hormones. It is most commonly seen in long-standing goiters, usually in elderly women. Okay, so it is not as prominent. See, toxic nodule, solitary nodule, there also eye symptoms are not specific. Here also exophthalmos is not predominant. Here the cardiovascular symptoms will predominate. So if you see the radioactive iodine uptake, RAI uptake, there are multiple hot nodules. Okay, on the left side it is there, on right side 2 or 3 spots are there, and the surrounding thyroid tissue is either it is warm or it is even not even taking up the radioactive iodine, and it is totally TSH independent. Okay, so how do you manage? So if you see the thyroid hormone profile, there is high T3 and T4, low or undetectable TSH. Okay, there are severe cardiac arrhythmias, congestive cardiac failure, and clinically there is multinodular goiter and multiple hotspots on technetium 99 scan. And long-standing goiters will form into which carcinoma, papillary or follicular? So it is follicular carcinoma. So first you use antithyroid drugs to bring it to euthyroid state, manage the cardiovascular conditions, and then proceed with the total thyroidectomy or even subtotal thyroidectomy. So it depends on the each case. So you can even proceed with the total thyroidectomy, and later the patient can be put on lifelong supplementation with thyroxine. Coming to the eye signs in thyrotoxicosis. So this is your favorite Viva question for your examiners. Okay, Von Graves sign, that is lid lag on down gaze. So you will ask the patient to follow your finger to look without tilting the head. So the lid will lag behind the eyeball. Usually the lid and eyeball have to move synchronously, whereas the lid is taking excessive time. Even so, it is late compared to the eyeball movement. So this is called Von Graves sign. Dahlgren sign is lid retraction. Okay, it is visibility of the upper sclera is called. Anyone? Anyone? Eye signs. See, in eye signs, at least you should remember 4, minimum of 4. Okay, so this Dahlgren sign, even there is visibility of the upper sclera. Stellwart's staring sign. Okay, it is incomplete and infrequent blinking. Okay, whereas another sign called Mobius sign, where there is difficulty in convergence of the eyeball. Okay, Geoffroy's sign, when you ask the patient to look up, without turning the head. There is, in normal individual, there is wrinkling of the forehead, whereas these creases are absent in case of this sign, that is Geoffroy sign. There are another so many signs, okay? Rosenbach sign, that is tremors of the eyelids, okay? Jelinek sign, that is pigmentation of the eyelids. Then Reisman sign, there is bruit over the eyelids because of the ophthalmopathy. So these are different eye signs of thyroid ophthalmopathy. So I'm not going into much details of the thyroid ophthalmopathy because that itself is a different topic. There are lot of mechanisms involved and so many surgeries have come to correct the thyroid ophthalmopathy. Okay. So this Dahlgren sign, imagine, see, in a normal individual, you will not see the upper sclera. Whereas if it is seen, it is Dahlgren sign. And also in severe cases, you can even see the puffiness of the eyes and excessive protrusion. So this Mobius sign, if you ask the patient to look at the nose, or if you put the pen or pencil in front of the patient's nose and ask him to see the tip of the finger, there will be absent convergence. So it is the medial convergence is absent in Mobius sign, medial Mobius. Stellwack, staring look, okay. Dahlgren's, it is lid retraction and visibility of the upper sclera. Geoffroy sign is absence of wrinkling over the forehead, and Von Graef sign, it is the lid lag. Am I clear? At least 4 signs you have to remember.
Ma'am, Kocher sign, here it's given staring look.
See, it is not only staring look, but also it is combined with the infrequent blinking as well as excessive protrusion, also the visible. So the Cockers is, it is a most severe form. It is a very, very severe form. Even the eyebrows are being elevated. And so almost all the signs, if you combine, it is the Cocker sign. Okay. Whereas the Stellwack sign, it is not typical staring look, but the person will appear as if he is very, very infrequently blinking. So Stellwack is relatively an early sign, whereas Cockers, it is a very late sign. So the person will almost, there is absent of blinking even with corneal changes. So Cockers is a more severe form, whereas Stellwack is a bit earlier sign. Are you clear? If you look at the thyroid eye disorders, he'll give in which order they appear. Okay, I'll be coming into later. Okay, so what is exophthalmos? I'll give very brief account of the exophthalmos. So it is protrusion of the eyeball. Why is it protruding? Is it because of the contents? No, it is because of the infiltration of the retrobulbar tissue with fluid, and also the spasm of upper eyelid and levator palpebrae superioris muscle. So because of this spasm and also the accumulation of fluid behind the eyeball, so the lids are retracted, eyeball will be pushed, leading to so many changes in the eye. So this symptom complex is called thyroid ophthalmopathy, and the predominant protrusion is called exophthalmos. So in thyrotoxicosis, it is due to the so many other conditions. So there are many other conditions which can cause exophthalmos, but in thyroid, okay, so it is lid edema, chemosis, corneal ulceration, papilledema, and there is loss of vision in late stages. Okay, I am not going into much details. So this is typical Graves' ophthalmopathy. So the treatment is IV steroids and lateral tarsorrhaphy. So this is the most common surgery performed. Orbital decompression in severe stages, and you should use artificial tears and eyelid closing measures during the night and sleep. Okay, so corneal protection has to be given and orbital decompression. Okay, so this is before lateral tarsorrhaphy. So this is after the lateral tarsorrhaphy. See, the protrusion has dramatically come down. Okay, coming to pretibial myxedema. What exactly is it? So it is a feature of thyrotoxicosis. Okay, it is not because of hypothyroidism. Please remember, what exactly is it? So it involves bilaterally. So it involves both lower limbs and it is symmetrical. The skin will be erythematous and dry. Okay, in lower leg and ankle. So lower 1/3 of the leg, that to dorsal aspect and around the ankles. Okay, it is due to excessive hyaluronate deposition and also glycosamino glycans. So GAT as well as hyaluronate will be excessively depositing. So that leads to this symptom complex. And there are certain other signs of thyroid dermopathy. Okay, the dermatological disorders associated with thyroid symptoms is, one is pretrabeal myxedema, there will be excessive pruritus, there will be palmar erythema, thinning of the hair, and Dupuytren's contracture. So if someone asks what are the different dermatological conditions with thyroid disorders, one is pretrabeal myxedema, okay, which is seen in hyperthyroidism, and pruritus, palmar erythema, thinning of the hair, and Dupuytren's contracture. So these are the predominant features of thyroid dermopathy. See, this is because of the excessive deposition of glycosaminoglycans. Okay, this is called as thyroid acropathy. So what are the different investigations you do in thyrotoxicosis? Definitely you have to start with the thyroid hormone profile, complete profile, and sometimes in early stages also you have to go ahead with free T3 and T4 because both will be deceptive. In both the cases, in hyperthyroidism, both will be elevated or something will be down. So in order to differentiate which is predominant, you have to even go for free T3 and T4 studies also, okay? And radioactive isotope study. So how does radioactive isotope RAI study will help? Anyone? If it is diffuse excessive uptake, it means diffuse excessive uptake.
Graves, ma'am.
Okay. There is hot nodule with no uptake from the surrounding structures. It is?
Toxic nodule.
Yes, excellent. And multiple hot spots with a large goiter are multinodular. That is Plummer's disease. Okay. Okay. A hot nodule which now has become cold nodule suddenly. So 6 months back you have done RAI study and now it has become a cold nodule. So it could be carcinomatous change because 10 to 20% of the cold nodules are predominantly carcinomas. Okay. Now, if you see the technetium 99, there is some certain glitches in the radioactive studies. Okay. Technetium 99 gets deposited in carcinoma. So the carcinoma is interpreted as a hot nodule. So it depends whether you are using radioactive iodine or technetium 99. If you use technetium 99, in a carcinomatous nodule, it might appear as hot nodule. Okay. So you should not get deceived. Okay. So whenever there is doubt, whenever there is, you can go ahead again do radioactive iodine study also because you should not miss a carcinoma. There is another nodule called as discordant nodule. So what exactly is it? A warm nodule in technetium 99 may appear as a cold nodule on RAI. So this is called as discordant nodule. So this need not be functioning tissue. Here definitely malignancy has to be ruled out. See, technetium 99 RAI will almost function in the same way. They will pick up hot nodule or cold nodule. But only one problem with technetium 99 is a nodule which is supposed to be a hot nodule, okay, which is supposed to be a cold nodule, it appears as a hot nodule only in cases of carcinoma. So any hot nodule picked up on technetium 99, you can get confirmed either with the RAI study, radioactive iodine study, or even by simple FNAC. So you should not leave a hot nodule on technetium 99. Okay. Don't get confused too much. Okay. And TRH, okay, estimation, ECG has to be done, and all these antibodies, because you have to rule out whether it is primary or secondary thyrotoxicosis. So the TRAPS, anti-TPO, anti-thyroglobulin, and thorough ophthalmic examination. Okay, this is a excuse me. So what is the excuse me, Dr. Ramya? So it is getting echoed. So treatment of thyrotoxicosis. So are you hearing 2 times, doctors? Are you with me? Okay. So first thing is symptomatic treatment, okay? And eye care. It has to be preceded in almost all the cases. And definitely the management starts with antithyroid drugs. Directly outright without preparing the patient, you cannot go ahead with surgery or radioactive iodine therapy. So the first line of management is antithyroid drugs. Next, it can be radioactive iodine therapy or it could be directly surgery. So I've already told you what are the indications for surgery. What are the indications of RAI therapy? Okay. What are the most common antithyroid drugs? Carbimazole, propylthiouracil. Okay. It is 10 mg TID. So how long you can give? So how long, madam? So we have started on antithyroid drugs. How long I can give? So it can be given up to 1 to 1.5 years. Okay. Then if it is not remitting, if there is constant relapses, then the surgery is definitely indicated in such individuals. Okay. The side effects are fever, rash, and the most dreaded is agranulocytosis, sometimes even hepatic dysfunction. You have to do repeated LFTs also. So hepatic dysfunction and lymphadenopathy. So there can be cervical lymphadenopathy also. So in such conditions, there is a confusion whether it is a carcinoma or it could be a drug reaction to the side effect of antithyroid drugs. So you should keep in mind. So this cervical lymphadenopathy can also be caused by these antithyroid drugs. Okay. Propylthiouracil, I already told you it's an antithyroid drug, as well as it prevents the peripheral conversion, indicated in pregnancy, pediatric patients, preferred in thyroid storm, okay, more than carbimazole, okay, because it even inhibits the peripheral conversion, hepatotoxicity and agranulocytosis. So for this also, these are the common side effects. So you can give it for 1 to 1.5 years. Once they relapse, then you have to go ahead with surgery or radioactive iodine therapy after bringing to relatively euthyroid state. Okay. Antithyroid drugs have to be continued before and after surgery. So as soon as you remove, don't expect dramatic changes. Even after surgery, you have to put the patient on antithyroid drugs for 1 to 2 weeks. Then only you can stop them and then you can monitor the patient post-operatively. Okay. So immediately as soon as you remove the thyroid tissue, don't take it for granted that yes, I have removed the thyroid tissue, so there won't be any thyrotoxicosis. No, it's not the case. You have to continue them because there will be still circulating hormones. You have to control it, and then only you can stop the antithyroid drugs. What are the advantages? So surgery can be avoided. Suppose if the patient remits, so there is proper remission just with the medical management, definitely the surgery can be avoided and there is no scar, and all the complications of thyroid surgery like recurrent laryngeal nerve, parathyroid injury, all those can be avoided and there is no scar. So these are all the advantages. Okay. The disadvantages are relapse. So the patient can anytime go into relapse, and the goiter, the cosmetic problem will not be solved in this case. So if there is a large goiter, then definitely these antithyroid drugs are not going to help. For that reason, you have to again go ahead with surgery, and that complication, that is agranulocytosis, which can be fatal sometimes. So that is the biggest disadvantage of this antithyroid drugs. As you all know, Lugol Sidin, I'm just going for the MCQ point of view, or it can be asked as a short note or short answer. Okay. So it is, what exactly is its composition? It is 5% iodine and 10% of potassium iodide. What is its function? So it is taken as 10 to 15 drops TID. Okay. What is its function is, it decreases the vascularity of the gland. Okay. And it makes the gland firm, less vascular, and easy to handle, so that the margins, capsule, everything will see you. Once you operate a patient prepared preoperatively with Lugol iodine and a non-Lugol iodine patient, there will be excessive blood loss in this not person, and whereas the gland will be beautifully defined, you'll get beautiful planes, and the blood loss will be very minimal if the patient is given priorly with this Lugol iodine. We do not give it to every patient. A patient who was thyrotoxic, brought to euthyroid state, preoperatively you give Lugol iodine to make the gland more firm, less vascular, and easy to handle. So you have to start before 10 days prior to surgery, and surgery has to be done within 15 days of beginning. Later, it will go out of control. There will be rebound excessive secretion of thyroxine, leading to uncontrolled thyrotoxicosis. So your surgery, you have to plan your surgery within 15 days after starting the Lugol's iodine therapy. Okay, what is its dose? Usually 10 to 15 drops, but you can even go up to 30 drops per day. Okay, in device dosage. Yes, any doubt? Is there any problem? No pop-ups. Okay, so this is the commercially available Lugol's iodine. What are the other drugs used? It's not just antithyroid drugs. We use beta blockers, usually used in Hashimotoxicosis. So in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, in initial Hashimotoxic state, we should not use antithyroid drugs because they are going to destroy the existing thyroid tissue because the patient is going to permanent hypothyroidism. So in that cases, you have to just control the effects of thyroid hormones. You have to prevent its peripheral conversion by beta blockers, control the cardiac symptoms, then the patient will ultimately go into permanent hypothyroidism. Later, you have to start the patient on thyroxine. So in Hashimotoxic state, don't use antithyroid drugs and hasten the permanent hypothyroidism. So it is actually contraindicated, okay? And also surgery is contraindicated in Hashimoto's thyroiditis because the thyroid is going to become non-functional in near future, okay? So it is also used in Graves' disease. What is the function? It decreases the heart rate, inhibits the peripheral conversion. So surgery indications, I already told you, it's a failure of medical management, autonomous toxic nodule, suspicious of malignancy, Graves in children. Okay, you have to go ahead with surgery because the medical management is very, very temporary and radioactive iodine is contraindicated in pregnancy as well as in pediatric population. And whenever there is large goiter with symptoms and there is thyroid ophthalmopathy, in such cases, you have to go ahead with the surgery for rapid results. What are the surgeries you can do is total thyroidectomy in case of Graves or large multinodular goiter, subtotal thyroidectomy or hemithyroidectomy in case of solitary nodule. So radioactive iodine therapy. See, more and more questions are being asked nowadays with this radioactive iodine therapy. What is its function? So it can be therapeutic or diagnostic purposes. The most commonly used iodine is for diagnostic ablation purposes, iodine 131. It emits beta rays. Okay. Remember, 5 to 10 millicurie, and minimum it takes 3 to 12 months for complete desired result. So it is not an overnight response. It takes a lot of time. So when the patient is in severe toxicosis, don't wait for this radioactive iodine therapy to act. So once you have controlled medically, when there is small focus, you can go ahead with the RAI therapy. So patient has to be brought to euthyroid state because it's going to take longer time. And the patient should be admitted and isolated after therapy at least for 1 week, for 3 days to 1 week, because the patient will be emitting radioactive substances through his body. So you have to warn the family members. Okay, whenever there are pregnant women in his family, they have to be isolated from this particular person. Okay. As a previous class, I already showed you, it is available either in the form of a liquid or in the form of a capsule. When is it indicated? In case of primary thyrotoxicosis, that is Graves' disease, yes, you can use. Okay, whenever there is autonomous toxic nodule, yes, it is going to selectively destroy the autonomous toxic nodule. And recurrent thyrotoxicosis. So after surgery, see, repeat thyroid surgery is a hell. Okay, you do not get proper planes. There will be a lot of blood loss and the high chances of nerve and parathyroid injury is there. So in such cases where you want to avoid second surgery, you can go directly with radioactive iodine therapy in order to prevent a second surgery in such individual. Okay. The contraindications of radioactive iodine therapy are pregnancy, pediatric population, and lactating women. It is not used in smokers. So smoking history has to be thoroughly taken because it worsens the thyroid ophthalmopathy. So for some unknown reasons, the thyroid ophthalmopathy after radioactive iodine therapy will be exaggerated, and there is rapid blindness also can ensue. So you should be very careful. So in such cases, you go ahead with the surgery directly after bringing the patient to euthyroid state. Okay. Whenever there is suspicion of malignancy, don't do radioactive iodine ablation when there is large focus of malignancy. Okay. Now small focus can be even treated with RAI. Okay, exclude pregnancy, proper consent. Many patients will come at a later date. Madam, why should I be on thyroid supplementation? Why didn't you tell me? So proper consent has to be taken that it is a permanent ablation of the gland. In future, you might have to be on lifelong thyroxine supplementation. So proper consent should be taken, and it is not helpful in ophthalmopathy. This is one more short note or whatever your favorite MCQ point, and this is one of the dreaded complications of your thyroid surgery. So what exactly is it? It's a life-threatening complication due to excessive thyroid hormones. It can happen preoperatively, intraoperatively, or postoperatively. See, the word thyroid storm, we usually think that it happens intraoperatively. No, it can happen before surgery, during, or after surgery. If it happens during and after surgery, it is most commonly due to inadequate preparation of the patient. So you have not brought the euthyroid status properly in that individual. You have under-prepared the patient and directly you have taken the patient for surgery. Any doubts, doctor? Any doubt? You can stop me. It is also seen in thyrotoxic patient unrelated to surgery. So it need not be related to surgery at all. Suddenly there is excessive thyroid hormone, thyrotoxic symptoms. Okay, it can, so there are certain precipitating factors, okay, that is diabetic ketoacidosis, infection, sepsis, simple dental sepsis can precipitate this thyroid storm in individuals, okay, and PIH, okay, pregnancy-induced hypertension. So already a patient with Graves. So if you are planning for surgery in second trimester, so this can happen in that individual. Oh, so all these are the precipitating factors you should keep in mind, okay. It can occur intraoperatively or within 12 to 24 hours of surgery. Okay. What are the symptoms and signs? There is hyperpyrexia, more than 40 degrees centigrade. There is circulatory collapse. Okay. Initial hyper followed by hypotension, cardiovascular collapse. Okay. Cardiac failure, restlessness, convulsions, coma. There is excessive bleeding in your operative field. Okay. There is certain symptom complex, that is Bailey symptom complex, which says that is insomnia, anorexia, diarrhea, vomiting, pyrexia, and tachycardia. It is if it is preoperative or postoperatively. So if a postoperative patient of thyroid, previously thyrotoxic patient, if he is operated and the next 2-3 days, if you see insomnia, anorexia, diarrhea, vomiting, and pyrexia, tachycardia, you have to keep in mind thyroid storm. Okay. How do you manage? One is you have to send multiple battery of investigations and you have to act very fast. Okay. Send for arterial blood gas analysis. Okay. ECG for cardiac changes, thyroid profile. You have to rapidly rehydrate the patient and tepid sponging to bring down the temperature. IV paracetamol up to 3 grams. Okay. And then corticosteroids. Okay. This corticosteroids not only decrease the metabolic rate, but also there is something called as adrenal drain out. Okay, the adrenal, so surgery itself is a stress, thyrotoxicosis is being superseded. Now the adrenals will go into exhaustion. Okay, so in order to supplement this also, corticosteroids have their role. So not only to decrease the BMR, as well as in order to prevent the adrenal drain, okay, drainage, that is we use corticosteroids. Okay, yeah, there will be severe metabolic acidosis, the dyselectrolytemia will be there, the patient has to be monitored in ICU. You have to give beta blockers, propylthiouracil, Lugol's iodine. Okay, and then management of cardiac failure. In very severe cases, you have to go ahead with plasmapheresis. Okay, now coming to our favorite part, that is MCQ. All of the following can be used in thyroid storm except A, radioactive iodine, corticosteroids, potassium iodide, propylthiouracil.
A.
Yes. Why? Why?
Time to act them and
Yes,
before
definitely.
using the
See, the name itself suggests storm. There is storm
There's
going
an
on.
emergency.
So yes, emergency. So you have to use corticosteroids, potassium iodide, and also propylthiouracil have to be used. So all these are used, and radioactive iodine is used in thyroid. The reason for can anyone do about it? Ramya?
option B, ma'am.
Preparation of patient.
The reason for thyroid
Option.
storm. Okay. Option?
B.
See, in olden days, the teaching used to be because of the rough handling, because of the excessive squeezing of the thyroid gland during surgery, there is rapid release of thyroid hormones into circulation. No, that idea is given up nowadays. It is most commonly due to inadequate preparation, and it has got nothing to do with recurrent laryngeal nerve injury or parathyroid damage. So even if you damage, it's not the reason for thyroid storm. Okay, so it is because of the inadequate preparation of the patient. So on option B is the answer. Half-life of which pair is correct? Any guess? Suppose there is no negative mark.
A.
So in order to know that, let's see what exactly. So iodine 131, I told you have to isolate the patient for 1 week at least. Okay. So it is given as 80 days. No. Okay. So technetium 99, it is 6 hours. Okay. If the person, so that's why technetium 99 is preferred. So it is done on outpatient basis. The patient will come to the nuclear medicine department. Technetium 99 is given, and for 3 hours the person will stay in front of that department, and then he'll be finally sent home. Okay, with a small caution that so for 2 to 3 hours you be away from your family members because you will be emitting these rays. Okay, so for that reason, the technetium 99 it is 6 hours. Iodine 123 is 12 to 14 hours. Okay, so the closest will be 12 to 14 hours means, so iodine 123 with 13 hours is the probable nearest answer. Okay, am I clear? Am I clear, doctor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The extraocular muscle commonly affected in Graves' disease is commonly and early and severely affected in Graves' diseases. See, in
Medial
ENT optal, any ENT optal people, third year MBBS, third year MBBS,
Rectus.
Medial rectus.
shall we see the answer? Okay. The mnemonic is I am slow in the descending order. So the most commonly affected is, severely affected is, earliest affected is inferior rectus, followed by medial rectus, superior rectus, lateral rectus, and then lastly the obliques. I am slow in the descending order is the mnemonic. So the answer is inferior rectus. Okay. Am I clear? Coming to other conditions, rare conditions, that is acute suppurative thyroiditis. Have you seen any abscess, thyroid abscess in your lifetime? It is a highly circulating, so the circulation is too rapid for any organism to accumulate there and multiply. So it is a very, very rare condition. So which is called as acute suppurative thyroiditis. If at all there is suppurative thyroiditis, the common organisms are streptococci and anaerobes. It is most commonly seen in children. So in adults, it is not seen commonly. In day-to-day practice, hardly in your lifetime, if you are very fortunate, you might see 2 or 3 cases. That's it. Okay. Suppose there are certain anomalies, congenital anomalies. There is persistent pyriform fossa fistula. So that can cause recurrent thyroiditis in children. It is often diagnosed by laryngoscopy. It is echoing, my voice is echoing. So the symptoms are neck pain, odynophagia, and then if there is severe sepsis because of this congenital anomaly, the pediatric patient can even go for tracheal rupture, chondritis, and inferior jugular vein, internal jugular vein thrombosis also. Okay, so these are the dreaded complications. Though it is rare, if at all it occurs, it can lead to these many complications. Coming to de Quervain's thyroiditis. So it is most commonly due to viral infection. It is seen in 30 to 40 years of age. HLA B35. The 4 stages are, see, you can remember hyper, U, hypo, U. So this is the sequence. but eventually they will land up with euthyroid state. So dequer means it has post-viral prodrome, okay, most commonly due to virus, seen in 30 to 40 years of age, HLA-B35, decreased radioactive uptake, high ESR is pathognomonic. Please remember certain points, okay? Try to pick up certain points. And the treatment is aspirin and NSAIDs, because ultimately the patient will go into euthyroid state. You need not treat it very actively, okay? Symptomatic treatment. What is Riedel's thyroiditis? It's also called as woody thyroiditis. There is excessive fibrous tissue deposition. Initially, it is throughout its course, it is painless, hard mass, non-tender woody thyroid. So here the pressure symptoms predominate. So you have to remove the isthmus. The patient will get dramatic relief even with the corticosteroids. So the latest drug used is mycophenolate mofetil. Okay. Hashimoto's, most common type of thyroiditis. Initial hyper, later the patient will go into permanent hypothyroidism. It is autoimmune, auto destruction of the thyroid tissue. HLA DR3, B8, DR5. Okay. Anti-TPO antibodies are positive in almost 90% of the cases. So whenever a patient with hypothyroidism comes, please don't right away, don't start supplementation. You have to rule out this Hashimoto's thyroiditis, in which case she requires more thyroxine supplementation. So just don't go ahead with the thyroxine supplementation immediately. Assess the anti-TPO status. In most of the times it is elevated. Okay. Then also evaluate for TSHR receptor, thyroglobulin antibodies, and also the sodium iodine symporter. Okay. The FNAC features are abundant Hürthl cell and Ashkenazi cells. Okay. On technetium 99 scan or radioactive iodine scan, there will be classical feature, that is diffuse non-uptake. None of the tissue, none of the cell will take up the radioactive iodine. And last class I told you papillary carcinoma. It is papillary carcinoma. It predisposes to in case of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So please, these are the last slides almost. Okay. Which of the following is true, not true about Hashimoto's? Not true. So is it seen in iodine deficient areas? No. It is the most common cause of hypothyroidism in iodine sufficient areas. Okay. Most common in women. Thyroid means almost women. So thyroid women. So you can take it for granted. And there is a slight chance of increased risk for SLE, systemic lupus erythematosus. Okay. But it is most commonly seen in young women, not old women. So the option would be
D.
Okay. It is common in young women. Any queries, doctor? Any queries? Any questions?
No, ma'am.
So you are at the end of the class, what I expect you is, please go back to what are the different scenarios, conditions in which surgery, RAI, antithyroid drugs have to be used. When to stop antithyroid drugs, when to give radioactive iodine, when not to give radioactive iodine, when is surgery indicated, when is surgery contraindicated. The contraindications for surgery is very, very less. The number, so almost any time and every time, surgery is the permanent and the final cure for the individual, unless it is a relapse case. So once there is relapse after surgery, you can go ahead with the radioactive iodine therapy. So please go back. Please go back to Tripathi and start reading the thyroid hormone synthesis. Please make nice notes and what are the different enzymes involved. And if possible, by heart the thyroid profile and also the levels of free T3 and T4. They might be asked in exam. So these are the extra things you have to do at the end of this class. Do you have any questions, doctors?
No, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, Dr. Ramya, can we stop the recording?
Yes, Jyoti. Yeah.